Hello, I'm Jason Rankin, and welcome to the first GrassCheck podcast, brought to you by AgResearch and AFBI. We are bringing you the latest information, insights and opinion to improve grazing management on your farm. This week, we are joined by Kat Huson from AFBI to discuss the latest information from the GrassCheck plots and farms. Conail Keown from CAFRE to discuss the impact of the dry spring in the east, and Ian McClelland, a GrassCheck dairy farmer from Loughbrickland, who will be discussing grassland management on his farm. First up is Dr. Kat Huson, who is a researcher in dairy grazing systems at AFBI. Thank you for joining us, Kat. Kat, so far this year, grass growth has been lagging behind the seasonal average. Is this the case this week?
Hi, Jason. So this year it's been quite a challenging season. We had that really heavy rainfall and cold weather that arrived in February and the beginning of March, and that was just when we might have been looking forward to turning stock out. But we saw really waterlogged soils after all that rainfall, and that's really held the grass growth back. Then over the past month all through April, we've actually seen far less rainfall than is normal for that time of year. And certainly here in Hillsborough, the fields were looking quite dry. So growth has really lagged behind the long-term average for all of 2020 so far. And on the GrassCheck plots this week, it's sitting at 59.6 kilograms of dry matter per hectare per day as an average growth over the past 3 weeks. That's 15 kilograms per day behind what we'd normally see for the start of May. And we're certainly seeing similar averages coming in from the GrassCheck farms this week too.
You had predicted a drop in growth last week based on the weather forecast. We got more rain than it was initially forecast. Did that help bring this week's growth above those predictions?
Yes, so the rain we got last week has certainly really helped. The soil moisture function in our growth model was looking really quite dry last week, and the forecast was for just 43 kilograms per hectare per day. So I'm really glad to see it a little bit higher.
What growth are you forecasting for the coming 2 weeks?
So with the weather set to stay dry and actually quite a bit cooler than normal for the next few weeks, we're currently looking at a decline in growth in the forecast, about 56 to 46 kilograms per hectare per day over the next 2 weeks. But that is based on our plot site here at Hillsborough and the figures we're getting for there. So I'm expecting farms in the west of the country and perhaps with wetter soils to fare a bit better than that.
And we really are now with that, Kat, starting to see a major gap between what one would expect in mid-May, getting close to up to 100 kilos of growth, and you expect predicting around the 50 to 40 mark in growth.
Yeah, so we're down and around about 50% of what we'd be expecting to see in May if this forecast holds true.
Grass quality last week was excellent with high dry matter of 24% and an ME of 12.4. Has the recent rain resulted in much of a change in the readings?
So we've certainly not seen a big change there yet. There wasn't quite enough rain to impact on the grass dry matter value too much. So this week we've still got dry matter sitting at 22%. And ME averaging 12.2. Typically, the beginning of May time, dry matter values would be about 18%. You can see the impact the dry weather is having on grass quality too. With those high dry matter and ME values, we'd be expecting stock to be doing really well at grass at the moment. They should easily be managing their target intakes. And with these high quality figures, they should be supporting an M plus of over 20 litres a minute. And with growing beef stock, you could be achieving over a kilo a day in average daily gain from grass as well.
What aspects of grassland management should farmers be focusing on this week?
So I think the key thing to be watching at the moment, given the current dry weather and the growth forecast, is to really be looking at the balance of supply and demand on your grass wedge. So with the low growth forecast, if you're looking at potential deficit in your grazing, I'd really advise taking a look at other forage supplies and different options for managing slow growth at the moment. If you've been seeing better growth on your farm, then you might be looking forward to taking first cut silage and even taking some extra bales if you have that option. And again, with the great grass quality and the conditions underfoot at the moment, I'd be really targeting those post-grazing residuals. So this is the perfect opportunity to really maximise grass utilisation. And hitting that good clean post-grazing residual is really going to help ensure that you've got the best quality regrowth in the next rotation as well.
We are now joined by GrassCheck dairy farmer Ian McClelland. Ian is a relatively new entrant to dairy farming, having previously worked in the construction industry. Ian started farming on the 40-hectare site near Loughbrickland in March 2015, converting what was previously a beef and young stock farm owned by the family to a dairy enterprise. So thank you for joining us, Ian. Could you start off by outlining your dairy enterprise?
Our farm here at Loughbrickland Bound Bridge direction, and there's 40 hectares farmed, and there's 86 cows there at the minute. Just one left to calve. It's an autumn. Well, I'm trying to bring it back to an autumn. There's some still spring calving cows, trying to block autumn calve, and currently averaging 9,800 litres on just under 3 tonne a meal. The platform's all grass, and silage is being cut actually today. So
very good. How's the grazing season gone for you so far?
Difficultly would be the word. It has been very slow growth all spring here. We're quite dry, and it was rock hard up until last Friday or last Thursday when we got a bit of rain, but it hasn't really transpired into an awful lot of rain, and we're starting to get tight already. We're starting to see it getting tight again. The cows were out in mid-March and out full time late March, but they were brought in again then early April for 2 weeks, and they were out again then for Sunday week ago. So they're out again a week and a half at night, but they were kept in at night and fed silage, and they were allowed. There was a paddock at the house that they could run in and out of just to keep cows clean more than anything else.
And that was really just to manage to bring your demand down to try and match it with growth. Bring demand
down. Other people said I could have fed more silage at milking time, but they wouldn't just eat enough silage at milking time. And the grass covers were there to graze up until I had the first rotation done, so I couldn't really do much about it. I needed to graze the covers that were there, the good covers. Didn't want them getting out of hand. So, but again, we're 3/4 way around second rotation, and started the third rotation still sitting at about 2,400, and it hasn't grew an awful lot in the last 3 days now, I have to say. Yeah. So we'll see.
The rain last Thursday it helped a bit, but it
helped a bit. But funny, there was last Friday, I think there was 1.8 mil of rain, and on Saturday there was 1.8 mil of evaporation. So
yes,
it didn't amount to much really.
You got it on one hand and taken away in the other. So in terms of currently on the farm, what's your average cover at present?
It's 2350 average cover now. That was on Sunday past, and it's slightly lower now, I'm sure, because just a few of the better covers are out.
And what kind of cover are the cows going into?
They're about 2,800 is the highest I can get. Now there's one field, a reseeded field last year, and it's sitting at 3,100 today, and they'll not be at it for 3 days, but I'm happy enough. It's good standing sabber grasses, and they're standing tall, so I don't mind actually grazing them a bit heavier, and it'll be nice to go into a cover that's suitable for the cows.
Something on it. And in terms of, I imagine at the moment residuals aren't a problem for you?
No, residuals aren't a problem at all. The only thing is that the paddocks are quite hard to divide, because you think there's a bit more on them, well, I think there's a bit more on them than there actually is. I keep giving the cows more than I think they need, but they still keep cleaning it out. And
how are the cows performing at the moment?
Oh, they're doing very well. They're sitting at 34 litres, and there's 8 kilos of an average going in of meal.
Is that on a feed yield, or is that a flat rate?
That's feed to yield, yeah. But now it's a manual. I do it manually, and I only update it maybe this time of year. I'd only be updating it maybe every 2 to 3 weeks, and I'm not that dedicated to it, I should say, but I could probably do it more often. But I don't find they don't vary as much. Just once they get onto a leveler playing field, they don't vary as much.
What are you calculating grass is worth at the moment?
Well, grass, if I could go into the right covers, grass is worth anywhere between 20 and 22, but I wouldn't like to just push them as hard as that just at the minute, because there's just not the bite in it at the minute. There's not the volume.
So you're having
to go into a cover of 3,200 compared to 2,800. You just can't get their fill of it.
Yeah, you're not getting the intakes.
2,800.
Yeah, at the current covers. Yeah, the intakes of the grass just aren't there. Absolutely. Looking forward, what are the key actions you'll be taking as regards grassland management over the next week or two?
I actually can see at the minute having to maybe rehouse again at some stage, because grass is just gonna, if it doesn't come quick, it's gonna run out, or it's gonna be badly affected, and I can't go into too low covers because you speed up even further. So as I say, I'm cutting silage today, and possibly one of those fields could be brought in 2 or 3 weeks time maybe, but that's 3 weeks away, so 2 to 3 weeks away. So it's just not really as maybe available to me as it could be. But I would say just it'll be a buffer feeding will be the only option I'll have if I can't get if I haven't grass growing enough.
You're saying you're just making silage, started making silage today. What's your normal routine for silage making?
24-hour wilt. The kickers in as quickly as possible after the mowers, and let it lie in the next day and lift the next evening. So I'm very lucky usually with the contractor. Because I'm cutting 40 acres or 35 acres here, the first cut, and I've an out farm which isn't as early as here, and it'll not be ready for another 10 days. So he can actually come to me usually after somebody else, and it's usually an afternoon. So I'm very lucky that way. And then they can come in the evening at milking time, and they've read up for 10 o'clock at night. Come in into an outside clamp, and I have inoculant bought, but whether I put it on or not, I just don't know at this minute, because it's totally ideal conditions for silage. So if it really needs inoculant or not, sort of debatable.
Understand.
And at the current prices and everything else, it's maybe a saving that can be made.
Okay. You've been in dairying now for around 5 years. When did you start measuring grass, and how does it help you?
Started measuring grass the second summer that I was in. Been to a few different meetings, and it seemed that the guys that were measuring were the guys that were pushing more litres from the grass. So that's what I wanted to do. Now, I would say I have a high yielding herd, but I would like to think that it's a grass-based system at the same time, and trying to maximise the use out of grass. So if you're looking to maximise the use out of grass, you have to measure it just to get to know where you are all the time.
You have a high-yielding herd. How do you strike that balance between good grass utilisation and cow performance?
Making lots and lots and lots of mistakes, getting it wrong lots of times till you finally get it right, is usually my way of working, Jason. I don't know. I try to push the cows as hard on grass as I possibly can. The same in winter on silage. I'm not scared to feed cows meal. Definitely not. But at the same time, I want the best use out of the grass at all times, and I would be very much into measuring and recording performance, doing margin over concentrate, and we have a good group that I'm in, and everybody would be on a league table in it. And it's a great way of pushing yourself, maybe seeing what other men can do that you're not doing.
Absolutely. Some people would worry about the high proteins in grass and fertility. Have you any concerns on that?
That's why I'm trying to go autumn calving, to be honest. It's much easier to get the cows in calving or in a stable diet in the house in the winter time. You can control the diet slightly more. They're probably getting more meal than, they're not utilising, they're only maybe on 10 or 12 milk from forage. spring calving men have no issues at all with it. So it's probably a bit to do with the level of meal feeding off grass as well is a problem. But when you have a high yielding cow, she needs to get meal.
Okay. Given the current downturn in dairy markets, many farmers will be looking to get more out of grass this year. From your experience as a new entrant to practice, what practical recommendations would you give to farmers to help them get the most from grass?
Measure, I would say, is the top thing. Measure your grass and walk your grass weekly. If nothing else, the walking of the grass actually to see where you are on a weekly basis is as good a guide as you'll ever get. We have found that even within our own group of men, that everybody has started to walk their grass on a weekly basis, and they have all come back with positive remarks about it. Having been out in the fields every week and seeing just exactly where your grass is and trying to go into right covers and come out of right covers.
We are now joined by Conail Keown, who is a CAFRE Dairy Development Advisor based in Downpatrick. Conail, after a very wet start to the year, we have had a very dry April with around a third of the normal rainfall occurring, and most of that falling in the last 2 days of the month. How have farmers in your area been affected?
It's funny, Jason. It's been a sort of mixed bag in terms of how different farms have been impacted, but certainly the April dryness has definitely had an impact on grass growth all across County Down, especially toward the very end of it, where we were getting into real soil moisture deficit towards the end of the month. But it's just interesting, which farmers, were impacted the most. And while you might think that the farmers in the drier areas, while they did have a serious impact, they had taken some steps earlier on in the year to try and mitigate against it. And it actually did help them get through that whole April spell without too serious an impact on their grass growth. Doing things like getting nitrogen on early and making sure that the correct stocking rates on their farms certainly ensured that they had enough grass on their farms throughout that month of April. And really only the last sort of week of April was the real impact on grass growth, where we've seen grass growth tailing off on a lot of farms. The very last week, you had some farms down to maybe 30, 35, 40 kilos of dry matter per hectare growth rates, where they should normally have been in around the 70 mark.
So that's really a very considerable difference. So in terms of the kind of things they were taking, I imagine they were keeping the rotation slow. Were they adding in a bit more feed than normal?
Yeah, they tried their best to deal with it. When they recognised the problem of the reduced growth rates, they went straight in to try and lower the demand for grazed grass on their farms. So, doing things like bringing in silage area for grazing, effectively extending the grazing rotation length. Supplementary feed as well going in there, extra concentrate going in as well. At a time when margins are tight, makes it very difficult as well, Jason, but sometimes you just have to do these things. But anything to reduce the demand on grass at that time was the way forward. Some people actually even supplemented with silage in again, to try and reduce that demand. But the farms that had a really severe impact in terms of the drought were those farms that maybe in some instances the delayed turnout, Jason.
Yep.
So their cows were going into heavier covers, and what I'm seeing from the farmers that I'm working with is that those guys were more affected than the others that had cows out earlier. So there's a bit of a lesson there for us, that whenever you're delaying turnout for whatever reason, be it stage of lactation or conditions of ground, can have a negative impact in terms of grass growth whenever the conditions go dry.
We did get some welcome rain last week. Has this been enough, or do farmers in the east still need to keep a watchful eye on the situation? And I'm obviously just looking at the bulletin which just issued, looking at a very unusual slight downturn in May. What do you think the situation is going to be going forward?
I think we haven't had enough rain. Some farms have recorded only 10 mils of rain, Jason, in this last sort of 10 days. And I can see from their grass measurement data that, growth just isn't where it should be at this time. So I still think it is having an impact on farms. Like currently, we should be on farms sitting at around 100 kilos of dry matter per day growth.
Yeah.
Measurements taken yesterday, the previous day on a lot of these drier farms, you're really only recording 50s, 60s, so it is about a third down on where it should be. So no, not enough rain, and I still think the farms in these situations and in the east of County Down need to be taking sort of action to continue to lower demand for grazed grass. You're in a really difficult place now at the moment because margins have got very tight on dairy farms. So
absolutely,
it's a real challenge for dairy farms to go forward and set up their grazing wedges and grazing blocks to try and minimize. We're talking about trying to use grass to lower cost of production. It's extremely difficult to do that in the current climate for two reasons. First of all, we've got some farms experiencing serious drought. And the second reason is some farms just aren't geared up to capitalise on grazed grass at the moment. They haven't got the infrastructure, they haven't got the grazing skills, and it's a real challenge to lower cost of production if we're in that situation, either of those situations.
Absolutely. Obviously, Conail, if we are looking at the next few weeks of low growth, and there's a limit to what we can do in terms of where there are constraints, shall we say, financially, in terms of bringing in meal, given the current milk price. Really, farmers, I suppose, have to look very carefully to make sure that there's no passengers on the farm. Would that be true?
Absolutely. Never has there been a time to streamline your dairy herd. There's absolutely no question about that. Cows need to be. You just need to be carrying what you need and what's working extremely well. So in terms of fertility, that you need to be monitoring extremely carefully, and not carrying cows that aren't cycling, not carrying cows that aren't in the correct position in terms of their lactation. There's never been a time as critical, Jason, looking at projected milk prices for milk produced in May. I think it's a very important step for farmers to do all they possibly can to try and capitalise on grass, our cheapest feed, and also ensure that the efficiencies within their own herd are right at the cutting edge.
While we have had maybe slightly less growth this spring than normal, on the other hand, the quality has been absolutely excellent. And we have a real opportunity now for farmers to make the most of grass.
Yeah, absolutely, Jason. And I suppose the question is, what can you expect to produce from grazed grass? And like at an energy level of 12.4, 12.5 ME in grazed grass, this last couple of weeks there now, and the grass quality seems to be suggesting that, you can realistically expect to take 20 to 22 litres, including maintenance there of that, which is it's a high level of production, but the secret is that it's absolutely perfect quality grass that you're putting into the cows. So pre-grazing yields of in and around 3,000 kilos of dry matter and good quality grass varieties. You are seriously talking about 12.5 ME, which, as I say, is capable of producing 22 litres, Jason.
Conail, I think it would be fair to say, though, that to get that quality of grass, you need the target right, the entry cover right, and your residual right. So what are the real targets you really need to be hitting to get that quality of grass?
To get that quality, Jason, guys going into their second rotation or possibly nearing the end of their second rotation now, everything needs to be perfect. So they need to be going into 3,000 total cover, and they need to be cleaning out down to about 1,600 or slightly lower. That's imperative to be able to get that quality leafy grass. Another very important point is, Jason, that there's enough nitrogen on. A lot of farms may be holding back in nitrogen because of the dry weather. You need to feed the crop to get the quality. And that's very important, because if a crop runs out of feed, it literally goes into sort of close down and starts producing the stem very quickly. We want to do away with that stem and maintain leafy grass for the cows.
The silage season is now well underway in County Down. How have your clients been getting on so far?
Yeah, it's silage has been getting cut, and there's a fair bit of silage harvested already in the peninsula and in County Down. But a lot of the farms that are taking silage have been farms that traditionally would harvest early, would harvest maybe 4 cuts of silage. So I think that's fine, but you will have to remember that the first cut of silage is our cheapest silage we can make. You know, it's the cut that responds the most to nitrogen, and I stick by the old rule. You know, look, 2 units per day. You know, in terms of nitrogen uptake in a plant. So effectively, if a farmer's considering cutting silage now on the 10th of May, he really needs to have his 100 units of nitrogen on sometime just immediately after St. Patrick's Day. You know, to ensure that nitrogen's taken out. A lot of the farms that have cut are in that situation. They have already they have potentially their nitrogen on at the start of March. So fine, well and good, but in some cases, some producers are contemplating moving in on silage that, in my opinion, hasn't the nitrogen used up yet.
Is the dry weather a good reason to cut early? I know some farmers may be thinking the crop's starting to look like it's going to go backwards.
Yes, and in some cases, some really dry areas, it is, Jason. But the problem is there's no rain, no significant rain forecast. You take that cut of silage off, and you're left with a white stubble in searing heat and severe moisture deficit. So you may not be any further forward taking it off. What I would say, and what I've been encouraging farmers to do, is to take silage off grazing areas that cows can walk to enable you to extend that grazing block. And as I said earlier on, you know, anything to lower the demand or increase the supply of grass. So a farmer taking out a paddock that could be potentially grazed in 3 to 4 weeks is a sensible approach. You know, it gets you a bit of forage made, and it also ensures that you have grazable grass towards the end of May.
Well, Colin, thank you very much. Are there any other final messages you think that farmers really need to be paying attention to over the coming few weeks?
I think it is important, Jason, to be considering silage, you know, especially the autumn block calving herds, you know, where they do need silage of a higher quality for winter milk production. For sure, it is definitely worth looking at and maybe getting your silage tested if you are considering to cut, to ensure that there isn't any nitrate left in it. And also, you know, that will allow them farmers to produce higher quality silage, you know, of a D value of above 70 or 72, which is necessary. But in a lot of cases, you know, the weather is stable, so there's no real panic on just quite yet, I don't think, in silage. So it's just going to be interesting to see what happens. And on the grazing front, I do believe it's very important that we do take any measures we possibly can to set up the grazing block to ensure that we've got grass going forward throughout May. And if that means going in and cutting and baling paddocks, you know, so be it. It's very important to get it established, a proper grazing wedge.
In many ways, Conail, at the moment, there's a great opportunity to actually, particularly I suppose I think farmers actually who would normally struggle in wetter conditions in the west, to actually utilise and get those residuals down and really kind of bank that good grass quality for a lot of the rest of the season.
Absolutely, Jason. It is talking to some farmers in the west. It's been absolutely perfect grazing conditions for them. But you have to remember now at this stage, you know, in the west, there's farmers growing 80, 90, 100 kilos of dry matter per day. So if you take a standard crop of grass sitting at 1,000 kilos or 2,500, Jason, total cover, if it's grown 100 a day, in 5 days it'll be optimal for grazing. So grass is moving very fast on farms. So it's very important that the dairy farms where grass is growing extremely well, that they ensure that their pre-grazing covers do not exceed 3,000, 3,100 kilos of dry matter per hectare. It's very important that they don't do that, and they go in and they take out those paddocks to ensure that the quality of grass in front of the cows is optimal. given the current situation, it's our only chance.
That's it for this episode of the GrassCheck podcast, and my thanks to Kat Huson from AFBI, Conail Keown from CAFRE, and Ian McClelland for joining us. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to the podcast. You can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify. For more information, you can go to the GrassCheck website, www.agrisearch.org/GrassCheck, and the GrassCheck social media channels. I'm Jason Rankin, and join us the next time for the GrassCheck podcast. Until then, stay safe.